Hi everyone. So let's continue our discussion on throughput accounting. Earlier we discussed the introduction of the concept of throughput accounting. I would like to add some more notes on what we have discussed earlier, and then we will move on to the concept of theory of constraints. So what we have discussed earlier is that the objective is to maximize the throughput in a situation when an organization is facing a bottleneck process, which is holding up the output and doesn't allow us to achieve the demand. Okay, so let's add some more notes to what we have discussed earlier. If I will simply write down the formula here for throughput is the difference between selling price and direct material cost. Now, as we said earlier, is that throughput is the rate at which system generates money through sales. Um, what else? We have also discussed that the only variable cost in the short term is assumed to be direct material cost. And other than the direct material cost, all other operating cost or factory cost would be assumed to be as fixed cost, even including the labor cost, as we said earlier, because labor is paid on guaranteed wages. This is something which is more like a fixed cost. So yes, inventory is all the money that system has invested in purchasing things that it intends to sell. So in short, inventory is referred to as the cost of the direct material. So here we are not referring to the direct labor cost as the value of inventory, the value of inventory as in the value of raw material. And other than that, if any cost is incurred on converting that raw material into finished goods would be considered as our operating cost or factory cost. So this is what we say operational expenses, all the money that the system spends in order to turn inventory into throughput. As we discussed earlier, that this inventory has to pass through a process. That process would allow it to convert it into finished goods, and that could then help us to generate the throughput. Now, in the example which I was using earlier, I was giving you a general idea with respect to the time that it takes per unit. But actually, obviously, because if we are involved in machine-based manufacturing, it would be done in batches. So whatever total amount of time is available could be divided with the time it takes to make one unit to also calculate how much maximum output could be generated with the help of each of those processes. And then if the expected output is less than the market demand, then it means we will not be able to meet our demand. And this is a situation called bottleneck. So a bottleneck process is holding us up and we're not able to achieve our objective. Now, moving on to the theory of constraints, let's discuss about the theory of constraints also. Generally, if I will first give you a general idea about the theory of constraint, is that how we exploit this bottleneck resource. Okay, how we exploit, because if we will not exploit the bottleneck resource, we will not be able to maximize our throughput. So our objective in theory of constraint is to, first of all, identify the bottleneck. As I said, bottleneck is the process that is taking more time, and as a result, the overall output that would be generated from that particular process will be less, as in not enough to meet the demand. So such process we have to identify. And once this process is identified, then our optimum product mix, optimal production plan will be scheduled as per this particular bottleneck. It would be similar to the limiting factor analysis used also in decision making, where we calculate the contribution per unit of limiting factor and then do the ranking and then be able to determine the optimal production plan. So same steps would be performed. Once this decision is taken, because this is something we can do in the short term. Right now, what we can do is we can exploit, we can utilize our resources more effectively here. By whatever time is available, let's try to maximize our output by allocating the resources to those products that can maximize our throughput, because this is our ultimate objective. Whatever product is produced first, it should be the one that results in maximizing the throughput. And once in the short term this thing is done, like we have for now we have made our optimal production plan. In the long term, the objective would be to try to get rid of this bottleneck. And how we can get rid of this bottleneck? the novel which I was telling you earlier, I was referring to the technical article. In that example, it tells us that this factory manager contacted with one of the sister companies, and there were some machines which were sitting idle in those factories which were not being used. So this guy, he took up those machines and actually used those machines to cover up for the slow process or the bottleneck process to be able to maximize the output. So this is like, without making too much investment, you can actually get rid of the bottleneck. The problem that we face is that, let's say, if you try to get rid of one bottleneck, the bottleneck could shift to another process, right? Because maybe you will add more machines to, let's say, the shaping process, and you don't add as much machines to cutting process as we were using as an example earlier. So as a result, the bottleneck could shift to another process, and that process would then become your bottleneck activity, and that would then keep on holding you up. But at the end of the day, what we need to do in the long term is to be able to get rid of this bottleneck, either by investing in new machines, or as we said, by adding some machines which are either sitting idle or in some other factory, to be arranged in a way that overall cost should not be increased, the capital expenditure should not increase as such, and also in a way that it doesn't shift the focus of the bottleneck to another activity where we then again have to invest. So it could be increasing our capital expenditure. So in the short term, the best possible solution is to uh, to make the optimal production plan in a way that you are able to maximize your throughput from the available resources. So if we will now quickly refer to the steps involved in theory of constraint before moving on to the example. As I earlier said, first of all, we have to identify the bottleneck, the process that is taking more time, or the process that will ultimately result in generating less output. Then the second step is what we were discussing about the optimal production plan. We have to decide how to exploit the bottleneck, and this will actually involve making an optimal production plan. And this optimal production plan would actually be based on a ranking process, which looks at how much is the throughput generated by each product per bottleneck resource. And we will produce the product with the highest throughput per bottleneck resource. First of all, we will allocate all our resources to the product that is generating the highest throughput per bottleneck, because this is our objective. Our objective is to maximize the throughput. This is what it says, that subordinate everything else to the decisions made in step 2. In step 2, we calculated throughput per bottleneck, we did the ranking, and based on that ranking, we have decided the sequence in which the products we are going to produce. And this would eventually result in the optimal production plan. And we can decide that what is the preference of producing these products. And next, as we said, we have to take actions to elevate the system's bottleneck, as in if we can improve the efficiency of that machine which is taking more time. If some proper maintenance is performed, maybe the processing time can be reduced a little bit, or maybe if we can add more machines at low capital expenditure cost, or if we can arrange through some other factories or some other company within the group, so that our capital expenditure will also not increase, and we will also be able to process the output as quickly as possible to meet the demand. And then, as we said, that once you try to get rid of one bottleneck, it is possible that the bottleneck may shift to another resource which was earlier not a bottleneck, but now because the other process has more machines available, so they can generate more output. And the cutting process, let's say, which we were earlier saying as, let's say, 3 minutes per unit, is only a single machine. So that single machine within, let's say, the available total time, 1000 hours, is not able to generate as much units as the two machines used in the shaping process are able to generate as an output within the same available time, let's say 1000 hours. So yes, it's a process, it's a continuous process. If you try to get rid of one bottleneck, it may shift to another area, and then you have to focus on that other area. So now what we will do next, we will take one example. The example will be on limiting factor analysis and how we can apply it in the throughput accounting and how it can help us to achieve the optimal production plan, because this is the plan which will help us to maximize our throughput, which is our ultimate objective.